Welcome to another episode of Electable. I'm Deb Chubb, and this is sponsored by the Indiana Women's Action Movement. And today we are back with Destiny Scott Wells for an update on all of the trials and tribulations of our Indiana State Attorney General, Todd Rokita. We have to spend time before we talk on this show sorting out all of the stuff. It is just incredible how much stuff this guy is doing. And, it all kind of boils down to how can I get my name in the newspaper, most of it. But it is all also very curious and interesting. So welcome, Destiny. Thanks for joining us again.
I'm happy to be here.
Good. All right. So, okay, we got to get right into it. First thing, let's talk about the case against Holcomb. So Attorney General sues Holcomb. It tries to intervene in his case where he is suing the legislature because they passed a law that says that they have a right to call a special session, despite the fact that our state constitution says only the governor has that right. And I will say on this issue, I have to give it a little sidetrack here for a second, because I have mentioned this a few times and I felt like I was the only one saying it. So maybe I'm, out there, but now we've heard other people say it. And that is this notion. So we recall after Joe Biden won the election, one of the first things that the former president did was go to state legislatures and try to get those state legislators, the Republican state legislators, and for example, in Michigan, flew them out to Washington for a nice dinner with the president and tried to convince them to overturn the election results in their state. So at the time, we all said, no, legislators have no power to do that. Only boards of elections certify election results. And then when, this was all over, state legislators opened to sessions in 2021, and bills came out that, like, I could hear those words here and there, that legislators could then, if they felt like there was a problem, they could intervene. So all these kind of clues to me that Republicans around the country were trying to pass these state laws that were usurping the authority of the state legislature. So, of course, this isn't exactly that, but this is now a Republican legislature trying to usurp the constitutional power of a governor. So give us the update on this case. What's going on?
So the governor hired his own private counsel, and he sued the legislature. So named parties are, Senator Bray and others. And he does this, and the Attorney General, Todd Rokita, says, I didn't give you permission to hire outside counsel. So where does that come from? It's from statute. And there's been arguing about this before. Yes, the governor has to have permission when it's like a state agency, but the governor is arguing that he's not a state agency, he's the governor. And so he should be able to hire outside counsel. He hired John Trimble from Lewis Wagner and John's team, and they're doing a pretty good job. It's set for hearing on the 16th of this month because the AG filed a motion to strike saying that John and his counsel were unauthorized as counsel for the governor, and that only he can decide. Well, that already looks suspicious, doesn't it? Because why is the AG the sole decider on what constitutional questions can be raised in court? And so that's where we are. And so what we've seen all this Republican infighting, and we even have allegations that the AG is violating the rules of professional conduct because he's trying to represent people on both sides of the aisle. And a separation of powers argument. I mean, just multiple arguments being made. And so again, that's set for hearing on the 16th. This causes pains with the public because this costs money, right? So
Absolutely.
Just for the governor to sue the legislature, he already had to hire outside counsel. So those aren't state resources that we already have at the AG's office. And this is a lot of time. And so while they're busy with their infighting, hopefully the Democrats are running offense.
Right. Right.
So
So we see Todd Rokita like to, poke his nose into all kinds of issues. And I think one of these issues that's coming up around Indiana, and I really want to talk about this a lot because this is a really scary, again, another, where you hear these kind of words that, just pique your interest, like something is wrong here. So this issue of, it's all being lumped into this acronym CRT, critical race theory, which isn't even correct. It's a false narrative about teaching actual truthful history. But a lot of Republicans, including Rokita, has tried to recast this as a narrative about, being divisive and white victimhood of reality. So it's tough. It's tough when you have to listen to a history that doesn't reflect well on your race. But you know what? It's if the truth is the truth is the truth. So of course, in Indiana now we have seen outside organizations, very slick, well-funded, kind of nationalist approach coming into school districts in Indiana and trying to activate parents to fight against schools teaching real, truthful history. That includes a history of slavery and the impact on African Americans that had and continues to have. So now tell us how Todd Rokita plays in this story.
So AG Rokita has led a 20-state effort in writing a letter to the education secretary condemning critical race theory and the 1619 project being taught in schools. And as we were discussing earlier, I think this is a bigger GOP strategy to target suburban voters. And we see that largely happening in our 5th congressional district. And why the 5th? It was percolating there, and also it's near enough to the Indy market that it's going to make the news, make national news. And these are the issues that resonate with voters. So is this the new defund the police issue? I don't know, but we have to also look as to why is the attorney general getting involved. And these issues are largely decided at the local level. Vote for the right school board members if you don't like it. But I think if the AG is really posturing to run for governor, this is a opportune moment for him to get into what is going to end up being, or already is, a national conversation, those national conversations that people see on Fox News and take with them to the polls.
Right. It's going to be the new dog whistle will be critical race theory. Okay. So now, speaking of elections, you have informed me that there has been created an election integrity caucus in Congress. And again, these are Republicans who are trying to push these state audits that are not really audits. They're anything but audits. Using people who are politically biased, who are inexperienced, who don't know how to do audits, and of doing all kinds of publicity around it. Okay, now again, tell us, AG, what's his role in this one?
Right, so he's everywhere. And so this caucus is formed around this Republican manufactured loss of trust, and how do we restore trust in the process? And so he has been in front of them. He's been on video. He has it out on his Twitter where he's talking about voter ID, going back to his days as Secretary of State. And I mean, again, it's just like, what does this have to do with being an attorney general? It's completely outside of his lane. We have a Secretary of State and she's Republican. So I don't know why he's stepping in on her like that. She must be okay with it. But, he's holding up ideas trying to sound savvy, talking about like let's use blockchain technology. We can't have faith in the postal service, but we can use blockchain technology, which is a huge cyber threat. And so he's getting involved in these national conversations about voter ID laws. And we saw that, we talked last time, he had been in front of Congress talking about, voter ID, and you called him the patsy of Ted Cruz. So he's continuing to be the patsy of the GOP as far as election integrity is concerned.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So there's more. We have to go through because the list is long, so we have to move on.
We're speaking briefly on all of these.
yeah, we're trying to, because there's so many to talk about. So, so the next one we need to update on is the big tech investigation. This notion that, Facebook and Twitter somehow are victimizing consumers by having them sign an agreement and holding them to that agreement, basically. Right. I'm trying to completely reframe the authority and position of big tech companies as somehow big government who is, required to give you First Amendment rights. They're just a company. They're not the government. They're not required to do any such thing. So give us the update on that case.
Well, I wanted to mention that the first time we talked, I slipped in there. I said, I forgot to talk about consumer protection, and I feel like it was foreshadowing because, the attorneys general, they do a lot of work on behalf of state consumers, individual citizens. That's part of the good work they do. Rokita's office does good work. They do protect consumers. They're great. I always, I'm preaching they're great deputies. They're putting in the work. But it doesn't necessarily get the attention when you want to talk about big tech. He's, splashing around, I'm investigating big tech. And so how does he do that? So states have what their consumer protection acts. Ours is the Indiana Deceptive Consumer Act. And what that does is it protects consumers when they're being sold like false goods or fraudulent services. So services is where Rokita is saying that, big tech companies have been selling services, or not even selling really, right? Providing services to consumers that are fraudulent. With and where did he come up with this? Okay, a couple of people made complaints to the AG's office, as we can as consumers. So, call them up if you have problems with things. But, hey, my Twitter account, I was censored. So these are the things that he's using to pursue an investigation. How does that work? Okay, we have things called subpoenas. They're part of discovery and litigation. As far as an attorney general conducting a civil investigation, he has what are called civil investigative demands, and they're called CIDs. So he issues these CIDs to the big tech companies saying, I need documents. I need everything you have in regards to, and then it makes claims in the CID. A little bit more technical, I won't get into it. And so this happened with Texas. Texas did this to Twitter for censoring, suspending the account of President Trump. And so I think it's a good case to look to how this works. Twitter sued in California. They sued Texas and said, hey, this is First Amendment retaliation. And the court said, this issue is not really ripe to discuss. It's premature. So if you just don't answer the CIDs, then Texas can ask for a court order to enforce those CIDs, and it'll go from there. And there's a similar case going on right now out of Massachusetts. The AG's has been for some years now investigating Exxon Mobil, and that's dragged out because it's millions of documents. These are a very tedious process for companies, and especially when you have multiple states coming at you, because states aren't necessarily allowed to share what they receive on behalf of those demands with other states, and so nothing's been said. I think these tech companies will just not answer. And so then Rokita will have to sue to get those court orders to enforce enforce those CIDs. And, those, there's a previous Indiana legislator who said, the Indiana Deceptive Consumer Sales Act wasn't meant for this purpose. And I don't really find that a very compelling argument. It is a service. I mean, Indiana residents are getting a service from these companies, and attorney generals are allowed to make these demands on companies that aren't headquartered in their state through long arm statute. And so we'll see where it goes. The bottom line is that the AG's office is going to have to use a lot of resources to sue big tech, because the big tech, they're the richest companies in the world. Todd Rokita is going after the richest companies in the world on a political issue. It's a political issue. And that's really the takeaway from all this. I can do all my legal jargon. Sorry, I get a little too technical sometimes, but you should be mad. Because this is a poor use of your tax dollars. And the office is already, strained. Deputies usually they're known to have dockets, very voluminous dockets that, to try to keep up with. So we should want an attorney general who's using the resources of the office, in a proper way, not for his own personal gain. And this is really for his personal gain at the end of the day, if he decides to run for future office, which when has he ever not ran for office? He ran for office out of college and hasn't stopped since.
Oh, geez. We need to find some quiet little office that he can, be occupied with. But I mean, I guess there's just no way to contain him, it looks like. Right. And of course, that whole, thing, using all these tax dollars for that kind of case, if he goes to court and he enforces those CIDs, then we've got an AG office who is going to be taxed with spending all of our tax dollars trying to sort through millions and millions of documents, and really are going, in my opinion, going to come up with nothing. I mean, people sign an agreement if they want to use Facebook. The agreement sets out the rules for censorship. They're not required to do anything more than they have contracted with you to do. And it would be hard to say. I think that now these companies, are now like governments and owe you a constitutional right of free speech. I don't see that happening.
And it's even bigger than that. I forgot to touch on, it's just not the big tech companies that have received CIDs at this point. It's 8 civil rights leaders that were in a meeting with Zuckerberg at Facebook talking about, advocating for the people that they try to protect through their civil rights work, being harassed, etc. on Facebook. Facebook has meetings all the time with people, but yet the Rokita administration chose to pick out 8 civil rights leaders that, when you look at all 8, are Black or brown. So there's not one white person that's received a CID. It just looks preposterous, just the racial undertones of what they're doing in pursuit of this investigation.
Right. And it really does further that false narrative that the Republicans like to put out there, that civil rights people and the big tech people, they're all in cahoots to victimize white men. And I think that that's, again, this whole race baiting issue just seems to, they think that this is going to get them somewhere. And I don't see that happening. I just don't see it happening. Okay, next item. Okay. Now, there's another lawsuit, and that you say Attorney General Todd Rokita is actually the lead attorney on against the Biden administration. And this one, I think, has to do with federal oversight of environmental protection regulation in the states. Tell us more about that.
Well, and we discussed this one on the last show, so I won't go too much into it. It happened in March, but I want everybody to understand the different types of litigation that the AG's office enters. So the counsel of record on that case is the Solicitor General for Indiana, Tom Fisher, an excellent attorney. And so don't be thinking that Todd actually litigates this stuff. Does legal work? He turns it over to the pros. Tom's been developing that practice there for, I don't know, like almost 20 years or something. He's been there for a while, since the early 2000s. And so they do sue the Biden administration because of climate change regulation. And then like the very next week, they asked the Supreme Court to hear a California tort case where cities are trying to sue because of climate change. And they want to be involved in that. So on one account, they want the federal government to not get involved on the state, this very federalist type of argument. And then within days, they want the Supreme Court to take up a state case because they're trying to make this attenuated argument that, if California cities are allowed to litigate this in state court, that they will set national, climate change precedent. And so those cases are going on right now.
Right. So yeah, consistency is not required anymore, apparently. So just on a side note on that whole issue, you remember the case from the young people who sued. Who did they sue? The Trump administration about the future that we are taking away from them because we are not addressing climate change. And they lost. They lost that case. It was sad. But in Germany, a European country, one of those cases succeeded. And the court did find that that the current administration had a duty to protect the environment for the future of these kids. So it'd be interesting. That's fairly recent and probably not well fleshed out yet. So that's an interesting development I thought we should keep in mind. Okay. All right. Next item. Let's see. You wanted to talk a little bit about amicus curiae briefs. Just to kind of really describe, because this is really he's really a prolific friend of the court brief writer, and again, mostly for the purpose of getting his name in the newspaper. So tell us about some of those.
Okay, so I wanted to explain what they are and how they're used by Republican attorneys general in particular. So these friend of the court briefs. So traditionally, in any case, you have two sides, right? And we have a plaintiff, defendant, and these amicus briefs are called friend of the court briefs because you are just adding context for the court, and anyone can write them. Now, there are times where they've held a lot of weight. Brown v. Board of Education for the desegregation of schools, the ACLU's amicus brief was very important. There's another case, Baker v. Carr, that determined that federal courts could hear redistricting cases. Very important. And I want to highlight that one in particular because that brief was written by the U.S. Solicitor General. And so they are very persuasive when they come from the Solicitor General. So now you have attorneys general that see that private companies can persuade frequent flyers, so the ACLU, the more you file, the Solicitor General, the more you file. And now, so the Republicans kind of have taken this, a play out of the playbook and like, let's just file a lot. Now, that's not to say that the Democrats didn't do the same thing during Trump. I think if you go really back to, when the Roberts Court began, you see that like around 85% of all of the filings on the Supreme Court docket are friend of the court briefs. Wow. Even Mother Teresa has filed a friend of the court brief about women's reproductive rights. So that just shows that I say that one because it tells you how ideological these briefs can be. And does the Supreme Court really even read them? RBG said, we get so many that we put them into three piles. We're not reading that pile. We'll skim that pile and, we should read this one pile, So it just depends on really the issue and the justice if they take them into consideration. So you see now this block of about 20 Republican attorneys general that file these amicus briefs on issues all the time, and so sometimes you'll see like Rokita saying, we're suing over the Keystone Pipeline. And you're like, what does that have to do with us? The Keystone Pipeline, and it's because he's signed on as a friend of the court. And his office didn't even write it, right? He's just like one of 20 people that's basically written a letter to the court for the court to read as to why it's important to state interests. And I like how I saw it broken down once. It's usually 3 reasons that lead them to do this: to protect federalism for, federalist reasons. It's cheap, right? So you're not having to actually enter into litigation. So what you see Rokita doing with big tech, that is going to be expensive. But these friend of the court briefs aren't. And then also 3, it's just political. And so you see the parties becoming more polarized, and these AGs filing these briefs. And then at the end of the day, when all said and done, if the party that they sided with wins, they get to say, we won, right? Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily mean they won, just the horse they bet on won. Right. And so we have that there. They do it in state court too. And sometimes they do it for good reason, right? So state court, there's a Telephone Consumer Protection Act case that they filed out of Marion County. But you're probably not going to hear him talk about that. You're going to hear him talk about these large national issues, and it all just goes back to, really a political strategy. And then the office has lately had some other involvement, not necessarily amicus briefs, but I did want to touch on it in Title X cases, transgender right cases, a case, and reproductive rights litigation. So, and then you also saw lately the AG touting that the state won. We won on a state level case with the Catholic Archdiocese of Indianapolis.
Oi, that's all I can say. Oi.
Yeah. So basically, on.
Just like you say, a cheap way to get your name in the paper. So I mean, I've actually
we didn't even talk about his tie.
Oh, right. We do have to mention the tie. So yeah, and when we talk about understanding the Constitution, it fits into the big tech industry, I think, because he keeps trying to pretend there's right. So tell us the tie story.
Oh, let's end on that because it's funny. Yeah. So he has a piece on him that runs in the IBJ, an Indiana lawyer, about him pursuing his version of justice, and he talks about how he's being accused of being very, very active, and he tries to say that he's just doing what he thinks is the job of a statewide office holder, but he has a tie on that has the Constitution on it. And, so he talks about his graphic tie and, that he likes, to wear it because it reminds the office of what they're there for, and it's just like, maybe that's half the problem, that that's what he reads the Constitution off as his tie. Just get a pocket Constitution like every other lawyer.
Right, you might want to, invest in a little more comprehensive, writing of the Constitution.
It's just so corny. It's worth mentioning. It's fun to poke at. Hey, if he's going to put himself out like that, out there like that, then he has to.
He's got to take the heat. So great. All right. I think we hit everything up to now, but I know that we will be back soon for more updates. And we went through everything so quickly, and that's hard. But there's so much. And I just really want to say thank you so much. And congratulations on your new position. You are now the Indiana State Democratic Party Deputy Chair for Coalitions and Expansion.
Great job.
Yes, I got it. First try. So I'm just very excited about it. No one could be better for that job than you. And I'm so excited about the work that you'll be doing to bring together all kinds of organizations who have the same mission in mind. Really talking about, what are the basic democratic principles that are out there, working for real people, providing real solutions for real people, and smart criminal justice reform, all kinds, addressing climate change, helping, bring equality to the genders. I never even know how to even say that without just starting a rant. So all of those great principles that Democrats stand for. And there are so many organizations who believe in those principles. And now it's your job to bring them all together. So,
well, give
and
yourself
you
some
can do it.
credit. Give yourself some credit for putting forward, the idea of we need coalition building within the party. So hopefully it'll be a good fit, since I did some of that coalition building in Afghanistan. The Indiana
Very good.
landscape's a little different, but I'm pretty excited. So thanks.
Oh, you're going to do a great job. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Destiny. I look forward to seeing you again soon. I always enjoy chatting with you. You're the best.
Great. Thanks, Deb.